Hornady Dangerous Game handgun ammunition in 10mm and 357 Magnum. So I'm going to test it through my 4-inch barreled revolvers here, my 4-inch Smith & Wesson 610 in 10mm, and my 4-inch Smith & Wesson 686 in 357 Magnum. This ammunition is a hollow point, but it is meant to not expand. It's pretty much built to be more accurate, and I think that's why they put a hollow point on there, is because typically hollow points will have the weight of the bullet more towards the rear, so it's going to be a little bit more accurate, especially at distance. And they lock the bullet nose to the core so that it'll provide more of a straight line penetration. So these are non-expanding rounds that are supposed to be superior to hard cast because they also do not create a bunch of smoke the way hard cast bullets create. So our 10mm is a 200 grain DGH bullet, which stands for Dangerous Game Handgun, and is rated at 1160 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. Our 357 Magnum is a 165 grain Dangerous Game handgun bullet, pretty heavy for caliber. It is rated at 1510 feet per second, but they do not list the barrel length used. Now, every other Hornady round that is in their ammunition line does show an 8-inch barrel for its test barrel, so that's probably what they're using, is an 8-inch barrel. So I'm going to do my Dangerous Game animal ballistic test here. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my Dangerous Game ballistic test. So I'm going to do something a little bit different today. Pretty similar with this part here, but just on the front I got some carpet padding, and then I have some vinyl flooring right there before 6 inches of clear ballistics, and then a 1/2 inch medium density fiberboard, and then more clear ballistics. I do pretty much double of what I do with my normal defensive ammunition testing. Instead of 3 inches of clear ballistics and then a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard, I do 6 inches and then a 1/2 inch, because we're talking something much larger than a human, so I'm just trying to like double that up. No animal specific, so I'm not going to have back ribs, but I think that should do a pretty good job at representing something large and dangerous. And I did bring out my 4-inch Ruger Security 9 with some Hornady critical defense ammunition, because we all know that one guy that doesn't understand ammunition and bullets and ballistics, and he's like, well, I don't need any of that, I got myself this, and got exploding bullet tips, the bear don't want none of that. And he thinks he's as well protected as something meant for getting deep penetration. So we'll run a control shot of that into the ballistics gel. This does about 1150 feet per second from that handgun, 115 grain critical defense. That'll be a control round. We'll see how deep it goes in that, and then we'll compare that Dangerous Game handgun ammunition in 357 Magnum and 10mm to that. And then I am, of course, going to shoot at the steel target to see what kind of accuracy we got, see if we have better accuracy than typical. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 10mm 200 grain Dangerous Game handgun bullet. We are rated at 1160 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. By the way, if you take in all the measurements of this revolver, it's actually very similar to a 5.6-inch semi-auto, but then we have a cylinder gap that's going to lose anywhere between 2 and 5% of its velocity. Generally less with heavier bullets, but let's see how close we get to 1160 feet per second in my Smith & Wesson Model 610 here. $1,058, $1,042, $1,070, $1,054, $1,042. So that's very, very light, because I've tested some Underwood 200 grain bullets, and I was getting like, I want to say 1250 feet per second from this. So this is loaded really light, and the recoil is light. It's not, you know, I'm not losing hundreds of feet per second out of this, you know, 0.002 cylinder gap. It's just loaded light. Our 357 Magnum, we are rated at 1510 feet per second for a 165 grain bullet. That doesn't sound right to me, unless it truly was an 8-inch barrel. But let's see how close we get to 1510 feet per second with this. 1256, 1160, 1202, 1210, 1164. So definitely nowhere near the rate of velocity. That being said, that's that's about what you would expect with a full power load of this bullet weight. So not bad, but certainly not what you think you're going to get out of something like this. And again, the recoil is pretty low. So let's hit our Ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, so we have some carpet padding, then we have some vinyl flooring, then 6 inches of clear ballistics, and then a 1/2 inch medium density fiberboard to represent a big animal's bones, and then more clear ballistics. So first up, I'm going to test that 9mm as a control round. I'm going to try to go straight in the center of that block, and I'll do 2 shots each with the other calibers here to see how they compare to this. So this is your average Joe guy man's round that thinks he knows everything. See how our 9mm through a 9mm hollow point FTX through a 4-inch barrel does. All right, not very deep into a dangerous animal. Let's see if we get here with our 10mm, see how this compares. I'll do 2 shots. Let's go take a look. All right, so one of those shots with the 10mm did go down, bounce off that shelf, but it basically stopped where this other one stopped. So I don't feel a need to retest it, but both those bullets are backwards, which would kind of indicate some tumbling going on. With our 9mm control round, we actually did get expansion through all of that and quite a bit of damage there, and we stopped at right there at about 8 1/4 inches of penetration. So definitely low. This round generally gets to just barely 12 inches. So with that extra MDF in there and all of that, yeah, we stopped that pretty quick there. That definitely would not do a whole lot to a dangerous animal. If this were its ribs, let's say this is a grizzly bear and it's getting, you know, past those ribs, it's getting 2 inches. Yeah, you're probably in trouble there. But with these, we had some legit penetration, but you know, all the marketing on these is that they go in a straight line, and the bullets are backwards, which would indicate these are not going in a perfectly straight line. And all the damage right here would indicate that they are tumbling as soon as they hit that rib simulation. So they are not going in a perfectly straight line. And I've tested hardcast bullets that do go in a perfectly straight line and go very deep, much deeper than this in this simulation. So with our 10mm, our first one went to 23 3/4. Our next one went to about 24 1/4 inches of penetration. There's been plenty of times where I've had bullets come and stop right in this backstop here after going through here that are hard cast. So at least with a 10mm, it's not really comparable to a hot loaded hard cast, and part of that could just be because they are loaded pretty light for what they are. So let's hit that with our 357 Magnum, see how that compares. All right, 357 Magnum. I'll try to make sure I don't aim down and try to make them go, you know, straight best I can. So let's see what we get here with our 357 mag. Let's go take a look. All right, and that's why I like to do 2 tests with these rounds, because sometimes you get a lot of different performance. And again, one bullet is tilted, the other one is backwards, and that's why we had such a difference in penetration, because it looks like one tumbled earlier than the other one. So we have a difference in penetration. We have a good amount of damage from tumbling, but they are tumbling, and that's to be expected with such a long bullet for a 357 Magnum. So what we got going on here with our first shot is 21 1/2 inches. Well, I've just about seen that with hollow points, with 158 grain hollow points. So, you know, 21 1/2 inches isn't that great. And our second one here, we got pretty much the same as what we got with one of those 10 millimeters, 24¼ inches of penetration. So I am not impressed with this at all, because I have seen, you know, like the Underwood and especially the Buffalo Bore, which is even hotter. You take a Buffalo Bore 180 grain 357 Magnum, it's going to be in this. It's going to be in this fleece backstop. And I think the 10 millimeter would be as well. So these are loaded light, and the bullet design is not doing what it is advertised as. Now, it might do that in plain clear ballistics. You might see other testers do this and be like, they don't have any rib simulation in there, and it'll zip right through 3 or 4 blocks. But when you put this rib simulation in here, I do this because I find it to be very important to do, because I think it sheds a lot of light on what could be happening. And we can definitely see here, our 9 millimeter went in and it expanded through. It's got a bigger diameter. Both of our 10 millimeter shots are keyholing right here. Both of our 357 Magnum shots are actually straight. So I'd say in a tactical sense, for what it is, our 357 Magnum did a little bit better than the 10 millimeter here. That tumbled more. So we had a more straight line penetration with that 357 Magnum. So, you know, point-wise system, which is something I'm just making up now, I'm going to say our 357 Magnum did better for what it is, because 10 millimeter can be loaded a lot hotter than this. As where this is pretty good for 357 Magnum, it's really far below the potential of 10 millimeter. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them, then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of control and accuracy I can get on steel with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets, and the first thing I'm going to say is I'm really surprised at just how well that critical defense actually performed in this test. We went through, you know, carpet padding, which, you know, that could definitely clog a normal hollow point. Then vinyl flooring, which, you know, you don't think that's that hard, but when you're moving really fast, it actually does affect things pretty severely. And then after going through 6 more inches of clear ballistics, going through a full 1/2 inch medium density fiberboard, and we're still expanded, we're not really busted up or anything like that. That's pretty impressive for that critical defense. So even though I'm not super impressed with Hornady's, you know, dangerous animal stuff, this is still pretty impressive to see that. And we didn't get very much penetration because it is a relatively weak round. But looking at our dangerous game handgun bullets here, not really anything happened with them. They're not deformed at all. So they are definitely a very hard bullet. You will sometimes see deformation of bullets of this nature. But these are very hard bullets. You know, our 357s up here, and back here we have our 10 millimeters, our first 357 Magnum here. Very long bullet. That definitely explains the tumbling. Our second 357 Magnum here looks essentially identical. And we're not going to see much difference with our 10 millimeter here, a 10 millimeter bullet. First one, no deformation of any kind. And our second one here. So the bullet, in theory, this design seems pretty good, but honestly, I think the bullet is just too long for what it is. It's gonna, especially with the 357, it's gonna start tumbling because of that length of that bullet. And I know that having more bullet mass is usually better for getting penetration, but not with this design. You know, more of a semi-wad cutter type bullet will stay straighter longer than this. This seems round enough, it's going to want to start tumbling pretty quickly. So I would think they need a different design for this to work really well, or they would need a shorter bullet just with a lot more power behind it. A lighter bullet, essentially. Instead of a 165, maybe a, I don't know, 145 grain bullet that's hard in the center, moving a lot faster. Or maybe a 170 grain bullet that's harder, moving a lot faster, would probably do a little bit better for straight line penetration. But that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, so this ammo has 2 selling points that they've listed, and one is that, you know, you can get faster follow-up shots with these because there's no smoke like in a hard cast. personally, I've never had an issue with getting follow-up shots because of the smoke. The smoke can become annoying, but it's not really obscured my vision. There's not that much that it would completely obscure my vision. And the other attribute that they're saying is that they're more accurate. So we'll do some quicker shots here from 25 yards double action, see how well my follow-up shots do, and then I'll back it up and see how they do for accuracy. So 10 millimeter, see how I can do with this, 25 yards. All right, not too bad. Trying to fire them kind of quickly. They did okay. 357 mag. All right, that misses completely on me. I'm just trying to get a front sight picture as fast as I can and pop those shots off, and I did miss one. That's on me because I could tell that the ammo actually is pretty accurate, controllable. But a lot of that controllability and quicker follow-up shots has more to do with the fact these are loaded light than what it has to do with that there's not a lot of smoke. So let me back it up and see how they do from some more distance. All right, 75 yards from the target just for fun. I'm going to do some single action with these as if I was hunting with these, maybe SHTF situation. A 4-inch revolver isn't really much of a hunting gun, but let's say I'm at 75 yards and I have to shoot something for whatever reason at that distance. So these are going to be pretty accurate at that distance. So I'll go single action, see if I can hit the target from 75 yards. I must have just grazed that because I don't really see any impacts. All right, so I don't know why I missed. I was aiming basically, first few shots I was aiming center and I saw they were going low. Then I aimed at the head and that silhouette and they hit more center, but I missed a couple for some reason. So we'll see what we get here with our 357 Magnum, see how this does. I'm aiming center with that. I don't know where they're going. I'm pretty good with this revolver from this distance with typical ammo, so I'm not really sure what's going on. I think they're probably going over the target because it looks like one of those impacts is high. So I'm going to aim just at the very base of that target, see if I can make any more hits. All right, the last two shots, I finally figured out what was going on. I had to aim off the target to the right by a foot or so. So they were shooting significantly to the left for me. And I'm doing this in single action, so there's not gonna be any point where I'm gonna, where with my 20 years of handgun experience, I'm gonna be jerking those shots by shooting single action revolver. They were just drifting to the left for me. And sometimes that's something that happens when you have kind of odd for caliber weights that you normally don't shoot. They won't shoot where most of your rounds will shoot. So looking at this ammo overall, not particularly impressed because there's a lot of selling points on it and none of them panned out for me. The only thing that I can say they were truthful about was there's not smoke compared to hardcast. Yeah, hardcast has a little bit of smoke from the lead and from the lube. Depending on how it's cast and whatnot, some lead will burn, some won't. You often have lube that will burn. Even with the powder coated bullets, you get a lot of burning with that too. So this is very clean shooting. Case ejection's good with these, I can say that much. I don't see a whole lot of soot on these, so they're very clean and not very smoky. That's a positive thing. But with them being more accurate, not seeing that, you know, it's probably just due to the weird bullet weights and me, but I'm usually better with ammo than this at this distance to miss most of my shots. That's not typical for me. And then when we look at the other thing, well, it's gonna penetrate in a straight line better than others. All the shots I took, the bullets ended up backwards, which would indicate they are not going in a straight line. They are all tumbling. And I've seen plenty of hard casts that do not tumble. So to me, this is gimmicky. This is gimmicky because I am not seeing any results that I would consider better for a dangerous animal. In fact, I think if I were to shoot full metal jacket of both of these, they probably do a little bit better than this did. So not impressed. So very interesting test. That's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.